It may look more like the surface of the moon than the Imperial Valley, but this is the landscape near the south end of the Salton Sea, where a cluster of mudpots never stops bubbling. It's one of the desert's strangest and most unpredictable natural phenomena. Some are small and sputtering, others are massive and disruptive, and one in particular is on the move, destroying nearby roadways and even rail lines.
You really can't stop Mother Nature, so it's like stopping a volcano from erupting or an earthquake from occurring. I, for one, thought I was, going to be able to solve this, but there is no solution to it.
But what causes these unusual geothermal features? And how did one become a major threat to infrastructure? To understand the science behind the mudpots, we have to start deep beneath the surface. To learn more about what's happening around the Salton Sea, I traveled to UC Riverside to speak with research professor Michael McKibben, who specializes in geology and geothermal science, specifically in the Imperial Valley.
So I've been studying the geothermal field in the brines down there since I was an undergraduate student in the early 70s.
Michael explains what causes the mudpots to bubble.
So the mudpots are there because of all the geothermal activity beneath the surface. So the magma that intruded the sediments at great depth heats up the rock, and some of those reactions release carbon dioxide as a byproduct. And so that CO2 then bubbles up through fractures and fault zones, and the bubbles of CO2 make the water in the mud buoyant, so that's why it floats to the surface and comes out.
He says mudpots are a fairly uncommon feature in the United States, with most found in Yellowstone National Park. But at the Salton Sea, they're found in clusters, and he points to the region's unique landscape as the reason.
In terms of plate tectonics, which is the theory of how the plates of the Earth move around, it's a unique, what's called a triple point, where three plates intersect. And that's very different. The only other place like that around the world is in Djibouti and around the Red Sea. So these are very unique places where a lot of hot magma comes up close to the surface.
In the Imperial Valley, mudpots are growing upwards like miniature volcanoes, a surface-level manifestation of what's happening underground, and temperatures run high.
They do get hot. There's reports of, right after the San Francisco earthquake, them throwing up mud and steam very violently, and they still emit a lot of steam and hot gas. You don't want to fall into those mudpots too often. And if you do that, the bacteria creates all this hydrogen sulfide and you smell like rotten eggs.
The mudpots on the Salton Sea's south end have been around for decades and have stayed in the same position. But on the eastern shore, it's a different story, where one massive mudpot has changed tremendously over the years.
They call it the Niland Geyser.
And it's one of a kind.
My understanding is it's the only mudpot in the world that actually moves.
What started as a stationary spring in 1953 suddenly began migrating around 2015, becoming the world's only known moving mudpot. The so-called geyser crumbles the soil as it slides in the direction of the Salton Sea, right towards the Union Pacific Railroad tracks.
So this one actually was migrating from a field. It was about 500 yards out into the farmer's field, and then it started migrating this way. So it was a particular concern to the railroad because this is one of their main thoroughfares to moving goods into the LA basin. If this track were to go down, they would have to go up and around through Nevada and Utah and come down, which would be a significant cost. It would cause impacts to goods movement throughout all of Southern California.
Union Pacific tried to slow the mudpot's progress with a metal barrier and added rocks, but it wasn't enough. The mudpot passed under the tracks, and a temporary bypass was created while the original track was restored.
So you can see where the railroad has actually put in additional riprap across there to help shore up their track.
Its next target, Highway 111. Leaving Caltrans District 11 team to try to find a solution.
Other mudpots, they'll just bloop, 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 and then they'll just create these little volcanic domes. And so very little water is associated with that. But this one has a lot of water. We put in some subsurface drainage to help, drain off the excess water so it didn't become super saturated. And it gave us time to build this detour. So we built the detour far enough over that we could allow the Mudpot to pass underneath the road. It will destroy the road. And then we'll come back once it passes through, and then we'll rebuild the road where it's similar to what the railroad did.
But the work doesn't stop there. The Mudpot is 2 miles deep, meaning underground infrastructure needed special treatment.
If you look, there's a fiber optic line. The orange is fiber optic. That's one of the backbones that feeds Imperial County, level 2 communications. And then there was a large Kinder Morgan gas line that fed aircraft fuel and jet fuel to Las Vegas. So they had to relocate that as well. And then we had some phone lines, which are a concern, but they're pretty easy to move. But the fiber optic line was great concern to us.
Images from 2021 showed changes in the Mudpot's size and position over the last 5 years, as it currently sits at over 60 feet wide and is just inches from the roadway. But what's still unknown is why this mysterious Mudpot moves, since there are no mapped fault lines associated with it. And experts have differing theories.
So that's the weirdo Mudpot. All the other Mudpots are aligned along faults parallel to the San Andreas. It's interesting what's causing it to move. It could be because the sea's drying out, and that changes the water table, and that affects the hydrology of these things. But the other thing that was pointed out to me by a local was that somebody put in water ponds next to that site between 2014 and 2015. And it started moving in 2015, but it may be that had an effect on the water table and the hydrology, and that may have started the movement.
We feel that there is an unmapped fault that's running through here that goes out into the Salton Sea. We had a swarm of earthquakes, about 400 earthquakes in 2016, and that's about the time that the Mudpot started moving.
Some local residents have wondered if geothermal power plants at the south end of the sea that drill wells into the Earth's crust have disrupted the land, producing the moving Mudpot. But Michael McKibben says his research shows otherwise.
The youngest plant out there is the Hudson Ranch plant, and that was built in 2012. And that had no effect on the old Mudpots. The Niland pot that's moving is farther away from the geothermal field than any other Mudpot. So there might be some people that want to blame it on geothermal activity, but there's no evidence that it's moving because of that.
While the reason behind the movement is still being researched, the cost is quickly adding up. The roadway efforts alone have already cost Caltrans more than $22 million.
And we did that work in a very short order. The one thing that I'm very proud of, District 11 is we support small business. So this was done by a lot of small businesses, which is the engine that drives our economy, especially in Imperial County, where we have a lot of underserved communities.
And the work isn't over, with plans in place to restore the highway. But at this time, it's unknown when the Mudpot will move again or in which direction.
My thoughts are if we got a lot of seismic activity, that could cause it to continue to move towards the Salton Sea.
Yeah, we shall see. I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen, especially if the sea continues to dry out and the drought continues.
Visitors can take tours of some of the Mudpots that are on private property. But as for the Niland Geyser, Caltrans warns Salton Sea sightseers to avoid the area.
It isn't a sightseeing location. I know people are interested. We do have stuff on our website. You can see it on the website. It is dangerous. You see there are no birds or animals around here. There's a reason for that.
While crews work to stay ahead of the moving Niland Geyser, there's also a growing effort to document and preserve some of the Salton Sea's geothermal features.
The Buttes, I think, have a place in culture, in historic culture. There's been a push to get it designated a historic site for the tribal records, but I don't know how far that's going to go.
The Niland Geyser's condition continues to be monitored daily as crews wait to see what happens next. And these Mudpots are just a reminder that there are forces actively reshaping this landscape in ways you can't always predict.